Here you are, sir. One Krabby Patty.
Why, hello dear viewer, and welcome back to a new episode of Deep Talk Proletarian, where we discuss today the Kingdom of Pharloom in comparison to the Kingdom of Hallownest. So, in the following game, Silksong, the sequel, well, at least game-wise, it might be a sequel lore-wise, but prequelists would disagree with me as well with the neutralists and stuff, but it doesn't really matter. In Silksong, we will discover a new kingdom called the Kingdom of Pharloom, which is seemingly very different from the previous kingdom which we, the player, visited in the first game of Hollow Knight, known as the Kingdom of Hallownest. We, as the player, will have a very different view on this kingdom, I believe, because it differs a lot in its aspects from the Kingdom of Hallownest, if we compare at least a few of the tidbits of info which we've gotten so far due to the promo material and Team Cherry's own, well, info releases and stuff, or blog posts and all of that info. And today in this video I'm going to give a comprehensive overview of how these differences are built. First we will start with the Kingdom of Pharloom, which we will see in the new game. So the Kingdom of Pharloom essentially has a topic or the theme of ascension. We as the player fall down in the intro cutscene, or at least Hornet does, and we the player follow her as we fall to the deepest depths of the kingdom. We as the player now have to make our way up, ascend so to speak. And with this ascension comes not only religious aspects, as signified by the religious caste which I discussed in a previous video, but also pilgrims, or, well, the citadel itself, a religious aspect I would suppose. The kingdom itself is still alive. It has many wanderers, travelers, sails, bugs, and different forms of kingdoms, all still, and tribes still alive in the kingdom. It's still sprawling, even though it is seemingly cursed, as we have found out through the pro material. We have to help the downtrodden bugs who still inhabit this kingdom, unlike Hallownest, where basically everything was fucking dead, or, well, bound to die. Rest in peace, Milo. Rest in peace. The Kingdom of Pharloom also doesn't have, or seem to have at least, a monarch. It's called a kingdom in much of the pro material, but we haven't as of yet not seen a king. Maybe the king died, maybe there's going to be a new king, maybe the king has been replaced by an oligarchy or an anarcho-primitivist commune. Who knows? Everything could happen technically. This is also another difference which I mentioned, that the kingdom is seemingly cursed. There's no infection here. Bugs aren't like sprawling orange goo or get bigger or kind of explode or something. That's not here. That's definitely not. That's absent. That's from the past. But they do seem to be cursed. I discussed this curse in a few videos before, but its main characteristic is that the bugs seemingly are working for some kind of goal. Basically, for example, the deep dock workers, which send materials up to the higher caste up above, or at least do something with them. What exactly they need them for is still unknown. The bugs in the Moss Grotto, on the other hand, are seemingly still just simple bugs. They just go around their daily business, they attack Hornet kills them, and that's the end. They don't seem to be working for someone or something. So that's a bit different. We kind of have to see how the curse plays out in the final game. Another thing need to mention are the fleas. In Hallownest we had the grubs, which I will discuss in a minute, and in this kingdom we will have the fleas, which are seemingly also on a higher spiritual journey, on their way towards, I don't know, a new home, a kingdom. We have to collect them for the band of travelers known as the Caravan. The Caravan asks us to collect these fleas. For what purpose is still unknown, but they will at least give us rewards in return. Now, one of the main things this game also offers, or at least the kingdom offers, is Hornet and her story, her past, which we haven't gotten a lot of in the first game. We did know a bit of info, and we know a bit of Hornet as a character and how she acts, and a bit of her origin story, but we will deal a lot closer with that in the second game, I believe, because it's about her and her journey. which will be very interesting to see transpire. Also, differing from the areas, some of the areas are very similar to the first game's areas. For example, Greymore could be attributed to a less spookier and less creepier version of Deep Nest, or the Moss Grotto could be called something of a Green Path kind of remix. We'll have to see how many areas are very different. For example, the water areas seem to be at least very different from the first game's areas. So that'll be very interesting to see. Now let's come to Hallownest, and how does it compare to that one? Well, in Hallownest we had to go downwards. The lowest point in the kingdom was technically the most crucial to us. The Abyss was probably where the game had its final conclusion, or where most people would say the game's true ending lies, in the White Palace, in the origin story of the night, and all of its consequences for the ending of the game. Another thing that differs from Pharloom is that the kingdom is, well, dead, as I said. Most bugs come here, and some are still alive, some are still up and bugging, others are just mindlessly dead or cursed, infected. Well, not very cursed, but infected at least, so that's a part of it. It seems this kingdom has been dying and is technically dead, as none of the cities are very inhabitant, except for the Mantis village and a few offsprings somewhere deep in the kingdom. Now, there is a monarch, or at least was a monarch, which the kingdom worshipped, and its worship can be found all over the kingdom. In fact, one could say that basically the whole Kingdom of Hallownest is just the story of the Pale King, his rise and his demise. In the end, one could say that it's a sad metaphor for this king's life and tragic death. There seems to be no caste. While there were some worshippers of the infection, for example the traitor mantises or the prophet, the Moss Prophet, it seems as though there's no real caste controlling the land like there will be in Pharloom. There are wanderers and travellers though, on the other hand. Iselda and Cornerfolk, for example, come to my mind. Quirrell, of course, who in the end sadly passes away. But there are at least some kind of people who, or bugs at least, who make their way to the kingdom and come here finding, well, glory, action, heroic struggle, or just a nice new home. In the first game there are also grubs, which differ from the, well, fleas in the second game. In a way they act very similar. You kind of find them, like step on them or break that glass or whatever will happen in the second game. Most likely just coming to them, they go away and you get some rewards for saving them, which is essentially a very similar system, which some people might say is very unoriginal, but I think it kind of works perfectly, especially because as I know Team Cherry they'll have at least some kind of twist for the fleas, as they did with the fake grubs, for example, which attacked you, or something at least. Now, the first game was, well, the story of the Pale King as well, but it was also the story of the main character, the Knight, which doesn't really have a character, so to speak of, because that's his whole purpose, but it did have its past, which we discover in the game. His birth, his, well, eventual flight, and yes, his ending, so to speak, depending on which ending you take as the player. From the areas, we have a few different areas, many different types of areas. One could never say that the Deep Nest is like the Crystal Peak, or one could never say that Dirtmouth is exactly like the Abyss, or the, the Queen's Gardens or something. Some areas were a bit similar, I would say. Like, for example, you could at least compare Green Path and the Queen's Gardens, because they were essentially, prior to that, they were kind of the same area, but there are still many differences between them to make them unique and interesting to explore. And I think that will be the same for the second game as well, when we hear of vaults and deep docks and ant tribes and forests of bones and dark gloomy areas such as Greymore or a Citadel or a Gilded City. All of these will probably be the most interesting thing to explore since the birth of the first game. Well, my dear viewer, I hope you all enjoyed this little comprehensive video. It became a bit longer than I expected it to be, but I'm just rambling at this point, so thanks for listening and speak soon. Check out the channel down below, subscribe if you haven't already, like and share, and yeah, you know, do the usual junk and stuff, and speak soon.